Welcome to Wednesday with Clear Mountain. Today we are very, very happy. I'm very, very happy to have Ajahn Nyaniko with us. Ajahn, so good to have you, and thank you so much for joining Clear Mountain channel. So, we've interviewed Ajahn several times before. He is currently the abbot of Abhayagiri Monastery in Redwood Valley, California. He came to the monastery as a young man, maybe 20 years old or
20 years old.
20 years old in 2001, got full ordination in 2003, has been living at forest monasteries in the tradition of Lumpur Cha in the West and in Thailand for about 7 years total, and since has been serving as abbot since 2019 or
2018.
And we've had other interviews with Ajahn where we talk about the Dhamma of abboting, different lessons that you can learn from being a senior in different settings, being an example in that way. And we had another conversation where we asked Ajahn about woodwork, the Dhamma of woodcraft, which was fascinating. And thought today to really focus on this book here, which is a book which Ajahn Nyaniko translated from Thai. It's a teaching of Lumpur Ban. The English translation is The Way Forward. It's freely available on the Abhayagiri website, also with people reading it. And almost certainly it's available for free in Thai as well online. But could you start off just telling us about the genesis of the book, your relationship with the book and what it is?
Yeah, I can't take credit for actually having the original idea to translate it. It was a now former monk named Ajahn Sanyamo who was he was inspired by Lumpur Ban's teachings, and I'd also read a few other translations of snippets of Lumpur Ban's teachings, and I found them incredibly inspiring and wondered who Lumpur Ban was, and then found out more about him later. But I had the teachings that originally were translated by Ajahn Sanyamo were then unfinished, and he had translated maybe 25% of the book, and I wanted to finish it. And as I was going about it, and my Thai wasn't, I kind of got better at translating over time. And as I was translating it, I found that my voice was different than his, and I felt it needed to be in a consistent voice. So I ended up just starting over and doing the whole thing. And it was a very enjoyable learning process. In terms of the coming about of the translation, it was done mostly at Abhayagiri, but also partly in Thailand when I was in a period of retreat in Thailand. But I found it incredibly helpful for my practice. That was my main reason for doing it, was I would take a phrase that I wasn't quite sure what it meant, and I would look up the words in the dictionary, and I would go on my walking meditation path and use it as a parikama, as a meditation object, and just think over and over again around the phrase and around the meaning. And if I came up with something that it wasn't at all a rushed project, so there was no deadline or anything. So just kind of think about it, and I would think, what is he getting at there? And sometimes I would have to go back too. Sometimes I'd have to go back and actually say like, oh, I mistranslated that. Oh, I realized I got that wrong. Because as time went on, I thought, oh yeah, he's using this phrase or this context again, and now I understand it better. So I kept kind of going back and changing things. And I think even now, if I was to translate it again, it would be probably different in some ways. My understanding of Thai is better than it was when I translated that book, which I started doing that in 2015 at Abhayagiri, and then continued on when I went back to Thailand in 2016 for a year and a half. So yeah, that's pretty much how it came about, was being inspired by these original, just in-house teachings, translations of Lumpur Bans, and I always kind of wondered at it, but it really struck me in the same way that Lumpur Cha's teachings struck me when I first read them. It's like, oh, this is different. This has a quality to it that's unusual, that really speaks to me.
I think I had read parts of it before, but in preparation of this interview, reread the whole thing. And what it is, in essence, is basically a description of the duties of a forest monk, a practicing forest monk in the Dhutanga tradition. and all what's proper and appropriate for such a monk. And rereading it, I found that it wasn't just a primer for monastics, but there are so many principles which really did also apply to lay people, to anybody who's wanting to practice. One of the key terms which describes this way of practice is the samana dhamma. Could you describe what samana dhamma is, and maybe the extent to which the book as a whole, what is the scope of it?
Yeah, and I can describe samana dhammas, and just to give a little bit of a disclaimer that I don't feel like I'm fully in line with all of the principles in this book. I still need to use this book for myself, and certainly I don't, as a personal practitioner, I don't want people to think that I live up to this particular book just because I translated it. But I find it still helps me. I find it inspiring and something to live up to, something to look up to, a high ideal to look up to. And the samana dhammas is living in the way of the samana, living in the way of a religious seeker. And he talks about a lot about the samana dhammas, samana sanya, just reminding oneself that one is not a layperson anymore. One is a monastic, a religious seeker, and that there's certain ways of conduct that are appropriate to a monk, a monastic, that maybe wouldn't be necessary for lay people. So it really is like it is a book, but it's also a manual. I see it as a manual for the fineries of how the Vinaya, how the discipline and the training is lived by the forest monks who want to commit themselves to the practice. And in Thailand, they talk about these different types of ordination. There's like Buat Chua Krao, which is like temporary ordination. And then there's like Buat Jing, which means like really ordaining. And then Lopar Ban, he talks over and over again in this book about Buat Ta, like the real, genuine ordination, which is the heart ordination, or Buat Jai, like the heart ordination. So that is independent of what you're wearing, independent of layperson or monastic, independent of the robes. So he, as a teacher, as the highest type of teacher, Longpar Ban talks over and over again about Buat Jai, like the heart ordination. So that's what we're aiming for. By doing the external ordination, we're looking for the internal ordination. So that's the essence of the samana dhammas, and it harkens back to the suttas where the Buddha says that one is a monk, that one who has finished the practice, that one who has finished with suffering, that one I call a monk, that one I call a Brahmin, and so on. So really Longpar Ban does take that, and that is the ultimate point of the practice, and he keeps reminding us of it. And that type of the samana dhammas, the refineries of ethical conduct, not just kindness, but patient endurance, and the practices of restraint, sense restraint, and a dedication to meditation and pushing the envelope a bit with practice, and say not eating as much as one might like to eat, not eating what one might like to eat, and calling into question one's preferences, and not sleeping as much as one might necessarily like to sleep, things like this. And he stresses all of these points of just how you live the holy life. So rather than, Longpar Ban is not big on theory and doctrine, although his teachings are very exact and precise. He's more about how are you doing it? How are you living your life? How's your day? How are you brushing your teeth? How are you using the toilet facilities? Are you mindful? Are you fully aware? So these daily practices, and then that builds up into something very beautiful. So I think that's the samana dhammas. He talks too about like walking like a monk, standing like a monk, sitting like a monk, lying down like a monk, even speaking, eating, keeping silent, going about your duties quietly and mindfully, and not too quick, not too slow, just kind of reminding yourself that there is a certain way to do things, which is extremely beautiful and inspiring. And so that's what it's pointing to.
He does oftentimes in the book talk about just the beauty of sincerity, really giving yourself to every moment of practice. And it's interesting. I mean, certainly you translated, there is a unified voice in the translation. And I'm curious if you could say a little bit about Lumpur Ban. We have different, even in this one forest tradition, we've got different teachers. Lumpur Cha had a different personality than did Lungta Mahabua, than did Lumpur Ban, than did Ajahn Gongma or yourself or Ajahn Kevali. Everyone has their own different personalities. And could you say more? I mean, there is some chili, there is some spiciness in the way that he speaks Dhamma. And I'm curious if you could contextualize that. If you met him and what his personality was and how to hold spicy teachings.
Yeah. Well, certainly I met him, I think 4 different times in my life and never had the opportunity to live with him at his main monastery, Wat Doi Dhammachetti. And he also had some branch monasteries. And, I have spent Pansa, I spent my 7th Pansa at Wat Nong Papong with Luang Por Liam. And so I hold Luang Por Liam up probably as my main inspiration in the holy life in terms of a teacher who I can meet with and meet up with, not necessarily meet with. He doesn't really do interviews or anything like that. But just to see his example and be around him. And also Luang Por Pisano at Abayagiri, who's still there, somebody who I can still hold up as an example or an inspiration. But then meeting Luang Por Ban, for me, it was like the closest I could get to meeting Luang Por Cha. And I'm too young to have met Luang Por Cha. I'm the new generation, so never got to really meet Luang Por Cha. I just hear the stories and I've read the books and I know a lot of the Luang Por Cha stories at this point. And I've heard Luang Por Cha stories, not just from Luang Por Pisano, but Luang Por Anan, Luang Por Dan, these other teachers, Luang Por Liam even, and they all have their own stories of Luang Por Cha. So I have heard a lot of stories and have painted a picture of Luang Por Cha for myself. And right now we're in a house where Luang Por Cha had a meal, and with people who met Luang Por Cha. So Luang Por Cha's presence is very strong, but I never met him in person. And so for me, meeting Luang Por Ban, I could say he's the most powerful person, the most powerful human I ever met in my life. Mm-hmm. And this sense of just raw power. Mm-hmm. And he's considered one of the scariest of the Kruba Ajahns in terms of like, you don't chit chat with him. You don't kind of just ask him like, oh, how's it going? You don't hang out with him. It's for him. It's Dhamma. It has to be about Dhamma. And he would be intent on people practicing. So, but yeah, meeting up with him a few times. I met with him. We had the manuscript with me in 2016 in order to ask permission, and then met up again in 2017 with the finished book. And I was afraid. I would always be afraid to meet up with him because it's a very powerful and foreboding presence. And even Ajahn senior to me would say they'd be afraid to go see him. But then once I was in his presence, he had such powerful compassion. I would say compassion was the strongest quality that I thought came through in terms of his own character, and through the kind of gruffness and fierceness, he had this incredible compassion. So even though I'd be afraid at the thought of going to see him, once I was in his presence, I would be like magnetically drawn towards him. And that was quite interesting. And then feel this incredible comfort and being held and whatnot, even though he was saying gruff things. And why do you want to do a book? That there's too many books out there. He would say things like, if you do another book, when people read books, their eyes are just going back and forth like this. They're not practicing. They're just moving their eyes back and forth. And so, and I would be thinking, well, I want to say that in a book, but like but then he said, well, if there's a reason, you do it according to the reason. And if there's a reason to make a book, you do it according to the reason. So, it was hard to know whether that was permission or not. I checked with some other senior monks and they did think that he gave permission to make the book. But then when I went back to offer him the finished book, it turned out he hadn't really truly given clear permission. And, but then he knew that I had misunderstood, and everybody I checked with had obviously misunderstood as well. And so, so then I guess I got away with it. You could say I got away with it.
Well, I'm so glad you did. Actually, I mean, right in the beginning, he's talking about his early monastic life with Lumpu Gongma, who was his teacher, and he talked about Wat Doi Dhammachetti is the monastery which he's been abbot at for up until when he passed away. And he talks about practice as a young monk there. And he said actually there was a fair amount of talking going on, but it was like talk about practice. People would talk to each other. Are you practicing Asubha? Are you practicing
on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, people are really testing. What new discoveries have you found out? And I feel like a book like this gives us...
how's your Asubha today? How's your restraint today? How's it going today?
Yeah, exactly. People are really talking about practice. And I feel like a book like this is a window into that and an exploration into that. And just the whole flavor of it. I met Lumpur Ban twice. And like you, I'd heard that he was very fierce and came into it. When we parked, I really established in my mind, okay, for as long as I'm here until we meet him and beyond, I'm going to keep my mantra. I'm only going to do my mantra. And it was basically taking refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And then as soon as I came to pay respects to him, it was one of the few times in my life where I felt like someone was reading my mind, but he started giving a talk on just that exact phrasing that I was using in my mantra without me saying anything, without me moving my lips. And he shifted it around a little bit. So rather than Budang Saranam Gacchami, which was my mantra, what he said was, you think you're taking refuge in Buddha, but you're taking refuge in the kilesas, the defilements, kilesa Saranam Gacchami. And I was just blown away. I mean, my Thai wasn't good enough to understand, but there was that fierceness there and also compassion. Like I did go back and pay respects to him some years later. And he talks about having the heart of a warrior. And he uses this phrase, being a practice monk. I think that is a hallmark. Like when sometimes people think of the Thai forest tradition, they think of that. It's got this warrior spirit. Could you say more about that? Like what is the heart of a warrior, or what does it mean to be a practice monk that he's pointing to really through the whole book?
Yeah, well, it comes up with Lumpur Liam and the other Ajahns as well. The Oton, the patient endurance, and they're all emphasizing that as a great quality. Even Lumpur Cha, when somebody asked him what were the qualities that helped you to succeed in your practice, he said patient endurance and reflection on uncertainty, or reflection on anicca. So it's really there. You do see that theme through all the Krupa Ajahns, whether it's Dhammayut Mahanikai or whatever. If they're practice monks, then you do see that theme of just persevere, don't give up, keep going, and sati.
Yeah.
So mindfulness. That's this emphasis on just practice. Really do it. One of the phrases I like in there's another book that's more recent than The Way Forward called Path and Fruit, which is more in-house. I've translated maybe the first 80 pages of it or something. So it's just some printouts that I have. And there's one talk in there where he uses the phrase, if you really do it, you really get it. So you say tam jing, dai jing, which is you really do it, you really get it. So this idea that you get what you put in, it doesn't just happen automatically. We have a say, and we have all the say in how our practice goes, and it's completely up to us. And even one thing that was striking the last time I was able to pay respects to him and see him was I was with some Wat Nanachat monks, and one of the monks asked him, "How do you train your disciples?" And he said, "I don't have any disciples." And I thought, oh, that's crazy for him to say, because he has thousands of students, disciples. And he said, "I don't have any disciples." He said, "I'm a disciple of the Buddha, as are all of us." And he said, "We're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. We're all disciples of the Buddha." And people train themselves. So that's a really important point with him, that emphasis on you're training yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. The Krupa Ajahns aren't going to do it for you. And it's up to each person to see for themselves and to train themselves. So, and whatever, another emphasis he makes in his teachings is that it's our own brain is the one teaching us. It's not an Ajahn. Our brain is the Ajahn. We're interpreting what the Ajahns are saying, and we're teaching ourselves based on that. So that is such profound wisdom, I think, on his part, and such penetrating wisdom, and really like Buddha-like wisdom, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting book, and the part of the main structure is something called the four requisites. So for a monk, or really for anybody, the Buddha points out that we've got clothing that we wear. For monks, it's robes. We've got food. For monastics, it's alms food. We've got a lodging, same with monks, or even living at the root of a tree, or medicinal requisites, whatever that is. And all of his teachings, one of his phrases is, look in every nook and cranny. Make sure you're checking every nook and cranny. This book is so much about the details of practice. And it's something that, I don't just read about. One of the cool things about rereading this is like, I'm not just reading theory about some foreign monastery thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. This is like how Abhayagiri is. It's like how Wat Nanachat is. It's like how Wat Metta is. Like, these are still living traditions of people not just thinking lofty thoughts, but he says, get into every nook and cranny. And he'll be specifically one of the contexts where he says that is about cleaning the monastery, cleaning the toilets, cleaning the bathrooms. He's got a phrase that he says, if you want to know the quality of the monastery, look at the toilets. If you want to know the quality of an abbot, look at the novices. So he says, examine every nook and cranny. And then he says, and most of all, of the mind. So I think some people might see a book like this and say, why so jukjik, why so like fussy about all the details of life? Isn't life just about being bloiwang, just about letting go? Like, why are you so concerned about the details? What would you say to someone who started reading this and says, oh, it's not for me, it's just about, cleaning monk huts?
Yeah. Well, Longpo Ban also, he talks a lot about the factor of interest, of getting interested in things. There's so many of these little snippets of talks where at the end he says, please get interested in this. So it's like sweeping every nook and cranny. Like the defilements want to sweep the wide open, easy areas. They don't want to sweep the kind of nooks and crannies in between the rocks and the places where people don't normally sweep. So he said the way of Dhamma is to find the places people don't normally sweep and to sweep there, the corners that you don't normally get cleaned and clean there. And I've kind of expanded on this a bit. It's like finding the dirtiest place and making it the cleanest place. So it's very much the same as the mind. But he also has a talk in this book about we don't do things just like lay people who are paid money to clean huts or sweep paths. We're not like janitors.
Maid or a janitor.
If we do it with the thought that we're doing it just to get it done so we can go back to our meditation, then yes, we're doing it like lay people. Yes, we're doing like janitors who just get paid to clean things. And it's just an empty act of cleaning. But if we do it as, in the talk that he talks about, is Dhamma puja. So as our practice, if we do it as a puja, then it counts as meditation. That counts as, some people like to count their hours of meditation. So that counts towards your hours of meditation. If you're putting effort into sweeping and you're being really interested and mindful and putting your heart into the activity of mopping the floor or getting down on your hands and knees and kind of cleaning the corners and under the desks in your kuti and getting really thorough about it and really interested in having a clean space, then that's going to really affect the mind and condition how the meditation is going to go. If we're doing the way the mind is, it's kind of like how we do anything is how we do everything, or how we do almost everything. And so if we clean or do our duties in the monastery that we're assigned to do, say it's receiving guests or cleaning or whatever it is, and if we're not putting our heart into the activity, but instead we're doing it just because we need to get it over with to get back to our kuti and meditate, that same attitude is going to carry over into the meditation, and the meditation is going to be conditioned by that. And then the meditation is going to be, well, let's get this over too, so we can move on to the next thing, the next meditation. That's just going to be conditioned also by that same attitude. Alternately, what Luang Prabhan is putting the emphasis on is if we do it with the heart of just really putting effort into the activity and focusing with mindfulness on the activity and getting interested in the activity and even enjoying the activity, it becomes enjoyable. That's going to carry over into the meditation and condition it in that way that we'll get interested in the meditation. We'll be completely focused on putting our heart into the meditation, and then the meditation will be quite enjoyable. And then our whole life becomes like that, and our whole life becomes enjoyable. And that's the way of the samana.
That's awesome. And he speaks about, there's a whole, what's neat about this is like, there are these chapters about a whole theme, like alms food or lodgings, but then there'll be sub like short little like Dhamma talks that he's giving. And one of them, he's talking about sweeping, actually quite a few, maybe 5 or 6 about sweeping. It says, sweep peacefully, sweep wholeheartedly. Think about how can I sweep quietly? And so I just recently learned that this book is required reading by the novice trainer at Abhayagiri Tanrakito Mix, which I think is great. And it really does seem like if someone wants to thrive or survive even in these Thai forest monasteries, they have to get their mind around how to train with this warrior spirit, or at least how to relate to it in a way. And I think you did a great job of explaining to someone who might be put off. Okay, this is too specific. Like, I'm here for lofty things. But I think there's another way of reading it, which I think I would have fallen into when I first came to the monastery of, there's a Christian term called scrupulosity, which is almost framed as like a near sin, where someone is not just having a sense of compunction or a sense of like getting into the details, but becoming obsessed with every minor detail. And it's almost like framed as a disease, like scrupulosity. And I think there are people with obsessive compulsive tendencies who might take this as like the absolute Bible and become more obsessed with the details and forget like a broader mind. And I'm curious if you could speak to that, how to hold the extreme detail here, how to hold the nook and crannies with this brighter mind.
Well, there's always that sense of just right that the Kruba Ajahns are pointing to. So, and we can come back to the heart of the warrior. I think we could say a little bit more about that, because when people hear about the spiritual warrior or the heart of the warrior, we might also think like it's like a movie where you need to defeat the enemy out of anger and out of a sense of revenge. Maybe they killed your relative and you need to get revenge on them. That's what we normally think of as a warrior. But the warrior, the heart of the warrior in terms of the Samana Dhammas, is the one who, when they have anger come up in their mind, they don't give into it no matter what. They resist that. They resist the anger. They resist the tendency to want to be critical, to be judgmental. And if we give into that, then we're kind of not yet warriors. The warrior is the one who has love in any circumstance. And then that's what the reason I wanted to mention that in terms of sweeping is because, how do you have the heart of a warrior when you're sweeping? Well, you're putting your heart into the activity. You're doing it out of a love. And for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, you're doing it out of a sense of just wanting things to be as good as possible. It can get neurotic if it gets but usually it's going to get neurotic if somebody has the tendency to be really irritated about, maybe I'll do it in a way that I want others to see, or like Ajahn Chah and Lumpur Ban would say, like, if you want to know somebody, you don't have to have psychic powers, just open their kuti, look in their kuti, and then you can see their mind. So are things just all over the place? Or is it clean, but is everything just stuffed into the cabinets? Like once you open the cabinet, they just stuffed everything into a corner. They just swept it under the rug. Or they just, it seems, no, but it seems clean, but everything's like denied. Everything's just not being looked at. So you would see that if somebody just stuffed everything into a cabinet. Or are things too perfect? So are things like folded in each square is absolutely perfect and kind of descending rows of height and everything, and that would be not just right. Also, that's too tight. So there's too tight and there's too loose. So, but then when it's just right, then it's incredibly beautiful. So I like this word beauty also that he keeps using, that he keeps coming back to, is pleasing to the eye, beautiful, wonderful, leads to peace when you walk into your clean kuti and you have a sense of peace. And he said when he cleaned things as a monk training, he would dream of his clean kuti, and it would make his mind bright and peaceful.
That's awesome.
And so it's all about the mind, the heart, and training the mind. It's all a training. And the whole reason is for cultivating mindfulness, perseverance, endurance, and joy. Joy as well. It's all connected with joy. As he talks about like refreshing joy connected with the training. I love that phrase. So heart of the warrior doesn't just mean you're fighting in a way that's aggressive, but you're persevering with love. That's the heart of the spiritual warrior.
That's beautiful. He has a specific line where he says, "Be tough in your practice, or be tough in your living of the spiritual life." But it's like, okay, allow your love to be tough. Allow it to be thoroughgoing. And
in terms of going, like, developing equanimity, it's all about the worldly way. The way of the worldly mind is to go with our preferences, go with our likes and dislikes. This is the ita ramana, anita ramana that all the Kurbhajans always talk about.
likes
the good and bad sides of the worldly winds, and we're getting blown around, buffeted around by those, but more and more with the sense restraint and the developing of patient endurance and perseverance. It's getting to the point where we can transcend and not be a slave to the comforts and the discomforts, the likes and the dislikes.
Tanjan, he talks in here, most of the talks in here come from throughout the 80s, from like 83 up to 88, 89. And he talks even in there talking about periods or ages, times of scarcity and times of abundance, and was feeling that even in the 80s at Wat Doi Dhammachetti in northeast Thailand, he felt that it was a time of abundance. And when there's periods of abundance, then there's more opening for lax practice. And I think that's something which a lot of idealistic Westerners, or probably idealistic anybody's, who come to a forest monastery, maybe reading a book like this, reading Stillness Flowing, reading Ajahn Mun's biography, and they come to a really good practice monastery like Abhayagiri, and they do see that it's not, in the case of Abhayagiri, you're having to abide by California building codes, which will not legally allow you to build simply and to live simply. So they'll come to a monastery and see that the buildings aren't made of thatch roof with leaves in them and bamboo floors, and they'll think, oh, this is a lax monastery. This is a period of overabundance. And so what kind of advice or guidance do you give to someone who is of that mind to find that fault and just relating to it realistically? Like, this is a time of abundance. It's extremely rare that I'll be want of food. We go for alms round, and pretty much every day we have at least enough, if not more than enough. And living as we are now, visiting, at the home of the person Ladawan who hosted Lumpur Cha. This is a nice place. We've got a fan, and so how to practice in periods of abundance, how to have that warrior heart when you're not in the battleground, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, one thing I like about Abhayagiri in particular is these dutangas are optional, so that when somebody does determine to take them on, they really do feel like they're wanting to put their heart into it. They're not just being forced to do it. It's voluntary. Just like our ordination is voluntary. Nobody's coerced us, hopefully, to come here, and nobody's forcing us to stay as monks. It's completely up to us, completely our decision. And it's the same with the dutangas. Nobody's coercing us to follow certain austerities that were allowed by the Buddha, but one of those is living outside. So if somebody does feel that, it's getting their practice is getting too lax by being in a kuti, I experienced that. I'm getting lazy because I have a nice kuti at Abhayagiri. So then getting outside and spicing things up again, stirring it up a bit, and going outside, setting up the glot, setting up the umbrella tent and the mosquito net, and just dwelling outside. We have that opportunity as well at a place like Abhayagiri, beautiful forest and remote tent sites, remote campsites where we can do that, and we can actually follow that Dutanga for temporary periods of time of living outside. And we have bears and mountain lions and things that can test us. And so it's really up to the individual somebody might get critical of that we have nice accommodations, nice dwelling places. And if somebody gets critical of that, rather than, I don't mind if people are critical in that way, but I would say, well, why don't you try living outside? And you can try it and see how you do. Yeah. And I would say for the people who get critical, more often than not, they're back to their kuti. It would be too difficult. But then it's the people who end up developing a sense of, these are nice dwelling places. These are not too nice, not too bad as well, not too austere, not too luxurious. They develop equanimity with the dwelling place. They're the ones who are going to be able to live outside comfortably as well. So developing contentment in any situation. It comes back to that mindset of how we are in one situation is going to be how we are in other situations. So if we have a critical mindset in a really nice kuti because it's too nice, we go out to a campsite, that critical mindset's not going to disappear. The critical mindset's always looking for something to be critical of, but we don't see that it's just the heart that's dissatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
So the heart's still going to be dissatisfied if it goes out to a tent site,
Yeah.
and it's going to find something else to be critical of.
Yeah.
It's too hot here. It's too cold here. There's too many bears here.
Yeah.
Or anything.
And people do, certainly for myself, like overestimate my own capacities. Like at Abayagiri, Tan Suhajo, living under a tarp, not even a tent, but under a tarp for months or even a year and a half, 2 years, impressive practice. And for myself, living in tents, you really do, when all of the external faults that I was finding are taken away. Okay, I can't find all these other things, or I can't find fault with the surroundings because I'm just living in nature under a tarp or in a tent. It's like the fault finding mind either goes in or it goes to the people around me.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm the real practitioner. I'm the warrior forest, whatever.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is lax. And one thing I found in here that I hadn't noticed the first time I had read it, if I'd ever seen it, was he talks about the Tudong spirit. And he actually talks about not just the capacity and the ability to do these ascetic Tudong Dutanga practices, like as in wandering around Thailand or America, but you can do them in the monastery. And he actually says you can do them in your meditation. He talks about heart wandering, where you can go on Tudong in your body. Say that you wander, you find, oh, the lungs are interesting. And you baklot, you put up your gloat umbrella tent and you just hang out and watch the lungs or the heart or the skins or the nails. And he says, that's your forest for this period of time. I thought that was just beautiful. I am curious if you could say more about, I think for some number of people, they might not know this word, Dutanga or Tudong, or the implications of that and how it was lived at the time of the Buddha, how it's lived now.
Yeah. Well, these things are all used to stir up the defilements as well and be able to see them more clearly. And coming back to the heart of the warrior, and I think what's actually not directly answering that question, but what's relevant for Westerners in particular is knowing that the real heart of the warrior is being able to say, I'm suffering. So like taking full responsibility rather than the kuti's not good enough, or this is not good enough, that not sad. The monastery is not good enough. This person is not good enough. These people are irritating. This is not a good place because of these people, and so on. But the warrior would say, I'm suffering. Full responsibility, and you're upright in that.
Radical
and
responsibility.
Then it's like, let's work with this. The warrior says, I'm suffering. Let's work with this. Rather than, I got to get rid of that person. I got to get rid of this person. I got to change this. I got to change that. That's the fool. So the warrior is, I am suffering. Let's do something about it. That's we'll practice. So then we come to the Dutangas and all these ways of practice that are recommended by the Kruba Ajahns. So what were you asking about the Dutangas again?
Well, just if you can say maybe what some of them are and how they're practiced today.
Yeah, I would say there are a couple that are regularly practiced at Abayagiri. There's only, in Thailand, they have like the one meal a day, and we have a breakfast at Abayagiri. We don't practice that one. That's why I say, like, I'm not living up to all the Dutangas that are recommended in this book. But
anybody could.
Anybody could, yeah, and people do, and I do from time to time. Yeah. There's also there is one Dutanga number 12, that actually is we all follow at Abayagiri, or we at least aspire to. And maybe not everybody knows this, but Dutanga number 12 is the any lodging users practice, so that we're supposed to be content with any lodging that we're assigned and not object to it. So contentment with whatever lodging we're assigned. If I get assigned a lodging, that's it. So I do try to follow that, even as the abbot, even though I have a nice kuti and a kuti that I'm kind of entrenched in. I still try to hold that mindset of, I think it was a couple of years ago, like, oh, should I move into the other kuti? And somebody said, no, you're the abbot, you should stay there. So I thought, okay, any dwelling users practice, I'll stay there. I won't change because somebody's recommending it. So to practice contentment with any dwelling that we're assigned, and that's number 12. Also the forest, the root dwellers practice, the outside dwellers practice, living at the root of a tree or living in the open air. That is practiced regularly by several monks at Abhayagiri. There are many people who are interested in that.
And everybody's practicing living in the forest.
We're all practicing living in the forest. But then there's the getting outside under the glot, or even out in the open if there's not that many insects. Or some people might like to practice with the insects and the mosquitoes. We don't have that many at Abhayagiri. So living in the open air is also an option. There's the rag robe wearers practice. That's very rare to practice now. Ajahn Mun was known for being a practitioner of that, but we have abundance with cloth. But there are monks who, you may have been one of them, take cloth out of the scrap bin and try to make things out of that. So there's a scrap cloth bin.
Yep.
And a monk is still, if somebody got interested enough in that Dhutanga, they would be allowed to find some cast off cloth on the side of the highway or something. Say a monk is going Tudong. It's allowable to pick up an old shirt or something and use it as patching cloth, wash it, make use of it, and so on. But the spirit of that, there's the letter of the Dhutanga, then there's the spirit of it. And certainly we want to be practicing the spirit of it, which is being content with any old robe, any old robe at all, being content with that. And that comes back to the format of this book being around the four requisites. It's like the way we relate to and use these basic requisites of life, that's going to condition us being on the path of practice. And these are just basic, ordinary things, the body and elements. The body is what it is, the body being, we do all sorts of contemplations around the body and around impermanence and around how our body interacts with these different requisites of robes, alms, food, dwelling place, medicinal requisites. And we have all practices around looking after the robes, the way we dye our robes, the way we look after our robes. We try to dye them in a somber color, not something that's too bright or flashy, is what's recommended by the Buddha. So he's coming back to all these recommendations by the Buddha. The Buddha was a forest monk. The Buddha loved living in the forest. And so all these recommendations from the Buddha that we find, and then he's talking, this is how you live it. This is how you live it, is through these Dhutanga practices.
There's, just as there are many different types of humans, there are many different types of monks, different types of personalities, which we come into these robes with. And, there's certainly monks who like people, some like nice things, and they might be trying to angle towards living in a nice hut or getting a nice robe. But then there's also monks, and I fell into this, is like almost performative asceticism, or like we were talking about earlier, like this cosplay forest monk. And so like in my third Vasa, I was going to Thailand, and notably, actually, my robe did tear, like a huge tear the night before I was moving to Thailand. So I put on these huge patches, like right in the front of the robe, and then I came into breakfast with Lumpur Pasano to kind of take leave the day of, and he saw the, huge other colored patch, because you couldn't not notice it. And part of me loved it. I'm like, yeah, real monk. Okay, yeah. You can see that I'm content with whatever. And he was just like, nope, get a new robe. He's like, go get a new robe. And that was totally right for me, because it was performative. It was like a showy thing. And so one of the chapters, or this theme, which you find again and again in this book, is being neat and tidy, which is probably a translation of Riep Roy, practicing in this neat and tidy way. This is a theme which Lumpur Pasano would talk about again and again. And you do see it, like for a monk who doesn't train in a forest monastery, they just think, I'm going to get ordained. And you see this a lot with idealistic Westerners. I'm just going to get ordained somewhere and then just go live by myself, live the real practice, live an ascetic life. And then they're not neat and tidy. Like if I hadn't ordained at Abhayagiri, had the privilege to ordain there, I wouldn't be neat and tidy, almost taking like filthiness as a virtue. The Buddha talked about this, is like before he became enlightened, before he actually practiced the extent of filthiness, like he would never bathe for a period of time, like wouldn't wash himself, wouldn't wash his robes, let his fingernails grow out. And so some monks do that, whereas one of the themes in these kind of Riep Roy, in these good monasteries, is this theme of being neat and tidy. Could you talk about how to balance that with our forest ethos, with the earthiness, but also being neat and tidy and clean?
Yeah, it certainly is a balance of qualities. So it can happen that, somebody wants to look the look of the forest monk, but it really comes back to holding to these standards and holding to these qualities of the Dhutangas and the Samana Dhammas, but not making a show of it and being clear about why one is doing it. It's actually a dukkata offense in the Vinaya,
Right.
in order to take on an austere practice, in order to impress people, or in order to make a show of it. And so just knowing why one is taking these things on, and I think most of us, myself included, we've all fallen into this at times, in terms of like, well, they're not practicing in this way and I am practicing in this way. But then over and over again, we see that comes back to just conceit. That's just a conceited way of thinking. So over time, as we train, the way we start to hold it is, well, this is just what I'm doing. I'm doing my thing, training myself. This is suffering. I'm suffering. I'm doing something about it. Whatever other people doing, I can't see their minds. I don't know what they're doing. I'm just going to be very unassuming about what other people are doing. No judgment. And I'm going to try to hold things in this way, and say, as a teacher, as an abbot, I'm going to recommend that people do things in this way, but I'm not going to police people. And just, that's my duty, is just to say what needs to be done, say the appropriate way to do things. And then it's actually not that difficult. It's just continually finding that balance and wanting to be part of the Arya Wangsa, the noble lineage of one is content with any old robe at all, whether it's new, whether it's old. If I have an old robe and I'm attached to it, I should get a new robe. I'm attached to my old robe. It's always the attachment, the clinging. And the Buddha said clearly that you can't be free of suffering if you still have clinging. So, okay, well, the way of the warrior wouldn't necessarily be to hold on to the old robe that's just sloughing apart and keep patching it, keep patching it, keep patching it. For certain temperaments, that might be right. For certain temperaments that like flashy things, it's going to be right to hold on to that robe. For the one who wants to change the old robe and thinks this is terrible, this is uncomfortable, this is awful, they should keep that robe. For the one who thinks, no, I'm never changing this robe, I'm just going to keep patching it forever, they should change their robe. So it's about the temperament and the clinging, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. So it's always just trying to find that balance, and just whatever we can do to weaken the clinging, and training the clinging, starving the tiger, training the defilements, training the clinging, and making it so that the mind is just going to be absolutely at ease in any situation. Something I've come to from reading books like this, or from diving into Luang Prabhu's teachings, is we don't want to narrow our comfort zone. Sometimes for practitioners, you see our senior monks even, where our comfort zones get smaller, and we're comfortable in a smaller amount of variety of situations. We want our comfort zone to be expanding, to be getting bigger, so that we're comfortable in any situation. So sometimes it might be, well, dim the lights, I'm not comfortable because the lights are too bright, or brighten the lights because I'm not comfortable if the lights are too dim, or it's too loud, or it's not loud enough, or like, I only like to be around this type of person, not around that type of person. So we want our comfort zone to be, they talked about Luang Por Chah being at home anywhere. Anywhere he went, he was at home. He was at home within himself. And so that's what we're aiming for with these two tangas, is with no food, that's fine. Food, that's fine. A lot of food, that's fine. No food at all today, that's fine. We can cultivate that. We train ourselves in that way. Like, oh, this is just no food, the body's light. Let's make use of this. The mind is bright. Okay, a lot of food, okay, I can be strong, I can put forth. There's benefits to everything, just always seeing the benefit. And the mind, just the upward spiral of the mind getting brighter and brighter.
There's lots of unique things about this book. I mean, one is that he really does talk about practicing for a full ending of suffering. He mentions these noble attainments. He's constantly saying that, why are we doing this? Why are we looking after the robes, the lodging, all of these things? It's to be able to practice. We design these things, we design our life in order to create not super comfortable positions, but to optimize, as you're saying, the practice for enlightenment, talking about stream entry, non-return, once return, non-return, arahantship. So a very vast and deep view of the human potential, but with such emphasis and almost love of the tiny details. He's got a poem in here. Like most of the book is just Dhamma talks that he gave, but he has a whole poem on bowl washing.
I think that was in a Dhamma talk, but I thought he's repeating himself in stanzas. So I took it as I don't think he meant it as a poem, but it was in the middle of a Dhamma talk. And I thought this is perfect to put into verse.
Okay.
So it does work.
It does work. But I mean, just you can tell his love for detail in here. And what this points to, there's a Thai word, at least in Northeast Thailand. It's possible even Bangkok. People don't use this word, but Korwat. It's one of the first words that Farang Westerners we learn when we come to a forest monastery is you have to learn the Korwat. We say it like a Farang. What's the Korwat? So what is Korwat, and how does it play into practice, and how does it play into possibly noble attainment?
Yeah, in the book he says a lot Korwat patipat, like the practice, the regular practices, observances, protocols. It comes from the Pali is kichawata. So the kichawata, if we don't want to use the Thai, we could use the Pali of kichawata, just the normally done duties on a day-to-day basis. And so say at a Bayagiri, it's the Korwat to do Wanpra cleanup. We clean the dining hall, the Dhamma hall, and the kitchen on the day before Wanpra, for example. That would be one of the Korwats. So Korwat or kichawata is not necessarily in the Patimokkha, but it'll be somewhere in the Vinaya. It's all Vinaya based. So there's probably about 1,500 or 2,000 minor protocols, like wipe your feet before you go in your kuti or whatever. That's a kichawata that's laid down by the Buddha. Or there's the acharya watas. So the protocols, the duties to be followed towards one's acharya, towards one's teacher, or the upachaya watas, the protocols, the duties to be followed toward one upachaya. The akanduka watas, the regularly done practices and protocols around receiving guests. So that's and there's even the wacha kuti watas, which is the toilet protocols. So the how to replace the toilet sticks. I mean, in modern times, make sure there's toilet paper, and make sure it's clean. And one of the hallmarks of Luang Prabhu's monasteries is that they would say, like, you could eat off the floor of the toilet room. It was so clean. So he has one of his talks. He's like, don't leave wet footprints, not just dirty footprints, but even don't leave wet footprints. You after you use the toilet in the monastery, you wipe up any water that's splashed around through maybe flushing the toilet or washing your feet off or something like that. There's a cloth hanging, and you dry things as well. So these are not just ultra fussy to the maximum. Some people might see it this way, but if you think about it, it's incredibly sanitary, and you're going to not have as much sickness in a monastery like that, and you're going to have more time to practice because you don't have as much sickness.
I was a little bit embarrassed. We took Tanajan Jundi, one of Lumpur Cha's most senior disciples. He was visiting Seattle and visited our new land, and obviously we only have one functional kuti, one functional hut, and we after we took him there, I came back and was listening to a talk that he gave at Abhayagiri, and it was just this: if you want to know a monastery, look at the tan, which apparently is an ancient word
for toilet.
For toilet. Look in the toilet, and I had to remember, I'm like, oh no, all we have is those porta potties, and definitely don't want to eat off the floor of those. But but one of my main takeaways of this book, or summarizing it, is actually in his words: have respect for everything. Have respect for everything. And he does this. The last full chapter is called For the Future of Buddhism. So all of this isn't for lifting ourselves up, for praising ourselves. It's not just for the sake of ensuring the longevity of an institution, although it does do that. But it's for the future of Buddhism as a whole, and flourishing of individuals and of the sasana. And I'm curious if you could just say more, just from your own experience, training yourself, training other people, being the abbot of a monastery, which is an institution, which is trying to do just that for the future of Buddhism.
Well, yeah, that's one of the greatest things that I found from this book and from Luang Prabhu's teachings, is that for the future of Buddhism, it's just looking after yourself, just doing your duties. It's not about trying to keep the institution going. It's not about trying to ordain as many people as you can. It's not about anything worldly. It's more about looking after our own practice when we look after our own practice, people are going to take notice, and even if they don't take notice, that's fine. But when we do look after our practice, then we have something to offer as well. When we do look after our practice, so if we don't look after our practice, but we just focus too much on the external aspect of the institution or the external aspect of the community, and we're only focused on that, and we're not focused so much on our suffering and making an end of it and lessening the clinging and using all these practices recommended by the group Ajahns, then what is there to share? There's nothing to share. So for the future of Buddhism, he makes that point in the end that look after yourself, just do your duties, just get on with things. Don't try to do something grandiose. And just all you have to do is look after yourself. And then the rest, really, it's a self-selecting system. It takes care of itself. So that's just so important to remember. And that's what Lumpur Cha was a teacher among teachers, as I think Lumpur Ban was, and Lumpur Liam as well. They're people who are completely looking after themselves, but they're also just giving encouragement. And that also just reminding ourselves we can't do the training for anybody else. Even the Buddha said he couldn't do the training for somebody else. All he can do is point the way. So for those of us who want to take the training as far as we can in this lifetime, and we get to a point where we might be able to point the way a little bit to people, but we still need to keep training ourselves, but reminding ourselves that's all we can do. And we shouldn't expect that people are going to understand us or that people are going to necessarily follow our advice. And that's totally okay. That's part of are we clinging to that? It's coming back to the clinging. Are we clinging to that or not? So that's the future of Buddhism. That's it. I mean, that's all we got to do.
So beautiful. And last week, Ajahn Nisabo and I were discussing just the merits and the advantages, drawbacks of whether if one has some time off, should one go to a retreat center, do a lot of silent meditation, or go to a monastery. And definitely there's a huge place for going to a monastery because you get to see this. It's counterintuitive. Like we literally live in squares. All of our clothing, for the most part, are squares and rectangles. We live a very square life. And one might read a book like this, and if you didn't know monks who've lived it well, you might think it's a life devoid of color, devoid of meaning, but that square is full. The square is full of color. The square is full of life. It's full of metta. And it's inspiring to go visit a monastery, to meet monks who do care about these rules, who care about the nooks and crannies, who care about the stitching. We didn't even talk about hand sewing, which is the norm, basically the requirement at a Bayagiri Wat Nanachat these days. And, every stitch is a stitch, can be a stitch of love. And
not quite it's optional. You can hand stitch or you can use the machines at a Bayagiri.
Yeah, but you have to do.
We haven't made a Korwat yet that you have to hand stitch
the exact protocol. Okay. Yeah. But still, it's inspiring. And people are not getting more and more stale, more and more boring, less and less human, more and more of a robot, more and more gray. Yeah. But it's like,
I would say it's the opposite. I would say more and more fresh.
More and more fresh.
More and more clear.
Softer innocence. Yeah. Be tough. But it actually somehow that toughness, that warrior spirit actually makes people like, just as we were taking leave of Lumpur Damrong, both of Lumpur Damrong and Ajahn Jandi, just paying respects. Yeah. And Lumpur Ben does talk about, to judge someone's practice, see how they bow. So we're going to bow to all of these teachers, and then just them grabbing our hands, putting their hands in ours. And it's like, you can tell a lot from someone's touch. And there's a lot of love in these rectangles. So.
Yeah, I like what Lumpur V says. Man, this form actually, and the Thai forest tradition gives us an expression to say as monks, manliness and strength, and even a sense of proving ourselves, and also warmth and gentleness combined with that. So that's where the balance comes in, the kind of caring and nurturing qualities combined with the expression of strength and manly perseverance. I mean, that's it's something that is very rare in the world, and that's what's kept me with it. It's just the inspiration of seeing these amazing qualities combined together, which I didn't think was possible before, actually. And it's an incredible balance. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Well, Tanajan, thank you so much for translating the book. People can find it online. We'll put a link to the PDF, or at least a text version. There are versions on the Abhayagiri website of different monks, including Tanajan Nyaniko, reading it on the Abhayagiri audio page. People can visit Ajahn Nyaniko at Abhayagiri. They've got a YouTube site. You can listen to their talks. Every day there's a Dhamma talk in the morning. And is there anything else you'd like to say on this topic of Korwat, of warrior Dhamma practice monks? And
I don't think it can be emphasized enough that I am suffering. It's not coming from anywhere else. I think that's the biggest emphasis these days is suffering is here. It's all here. The suffering's here. The Dhamma's here. That's all the Kurbhajans are talking about that. And we can be talking about that as well. We don't have to be different, because that is how it is. It's, I am suffering. Let's do something about it. And that empowers us.
Yeah.
I call that the Four Noble Truths empowerment, because if our suffering's coming from somewhere else, we can't do anything about it. It's just, we're doomed to keep suffering. But if I'm suffering and it's coming from here, I can do something about it. And that's both hard and empowering, because we can take charge of that and do something about it. That's the warrior spirit. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to people like Lumpur Ban and the Kurbhajans for pointing that out for me.
Yeah. Lumpur Cha, Lumpur Sumedho, Lumpur Pasno, yourself, really continuing that lineage. It's still a living lineage, even if we are in an age of abundance. So, well, apologies, didn't get to anyone's questions here, but we will be going over to Zoom as usual. We've put the link in the chat, and you can just go over there, and we'll see you in just a moment. So, Don John, thank you.
Okay.